Your next promotion is just the beginning, and this podcast shows you how to get there. Welcome to episode number 173. In today's episode, I am talking about anger, that thing that we as women in particular are not supposed to be talking about it. And certainly in terms of executive leadership, we're not supposed to be talking about anger. But today's episode, I am giving you all the dirt on how I see anger and how we can start to use it to our advantage to make more productive decisions and truly start to change the leadership table. Let's get started. Welcome to Women Changing Leadership. I am your host, Stacy Mayer, and I teach you how to get promoted, get paid, and bring your whole self to the leadership table. I am on a mission to change organizations from the C-suite out because women are the new face of leadership, and we are doing it on our terms. Hello, corporate badasses. Welcome to another episode of Women Changing Leadership. I am your host, Stacy Mayer, and kind of wound up to be here with you again this week. What I mean by that is life kind of sucks sometimes, and a lot of you are experiencing a ton of turmoil and frustration and, quite frankly, anger. And I want to address that and also share some of my concerns. So it may not be the happy, bubbly episode that you expected, but it's certainly going to be real and hopefully speak to perhaps some of what you might be experiencing and feeling for yourselves. So ever since spring happened, so March 20th, I have just felt a massive amount of energy and shift in the world, like literally like from the ground up. So I'm in California. We've been experiencing massive storms out here, big windstorms. And I know compared to the East Coast, it's nothing, but it does feel like something. You know, we lost a tree during the first storm. Our fence fell down during the second storm. And right as I am speaking right now, we're having another storm happening as well. And then internally, there's been a lot of fire inside of me and drive towards kind of like massive action, like almost like getting up on my soapbox and saying something, right? And you might be feeling that pull as well, like to do something, to be like, I've had enough. And then yesterday, there was another mass school shooting, which is even hard for me to even bring up. But I want to at least acknowledge that. And when we see situations, wait a second, I have to take a minute because I can't just keep going. And I encourage you to do the same. So I will take a sip of water. I'm actually talking in real time because you have to fill the space. And this sucks. It does suck. And there are situations that are happening for my clients, and I'm going to share with you a couple of different things that are going on. And some of the ways that I have coached my women to lean into their anger and not be afraid of it, but also to not let their anger and frustration control them. So as a natural people pleaser, that's like sort of a lifestyle that I have adapted since I was very young, and I'm very familiar with it, and I'm mostly incredibly positive. I still think I'm incredibly optimistic. No, that's just my point of view. That's not going to change. But in terms of positivity, that's part of who I am. That's how I see myself. And so I think that when I think about anger, I don't consider myself to be an angry person. Hopefully, if you know me, you don't consider me to be an angry person. And what has happened as a result is a lot of internal frustration. So I attended this workshop probably about a year ago where they had us scream into our armpits, our elbow pits, right? And massively scream. And I did this exercise and I couldn't believe the release that I felt when I screamed into my elbow. And apparently this is a practice that a lot of people have to kind of work with their anger. But what that taught me was when I did that exercise and screamed into my elbow, I had just tears poured down my face. And what it taught me is, even if I don't identify as an angry person, that I have anger and frustration inside me. And it's leaking out in all different sorts of ways that are completely unproductive. And my goal as a corporate badass and as your leader is to turn those into ways that we can turn that anger to work for us, to not suppress that frustration, but to figure out a way through it. So today's anger episode is going to be all about productive versus non-productive anger, and hopefully give you some ways to identify and channel perhaps the anger and the frustration that you might also be feeling with the world today. I was having a conversation with one of the women inside of the leadership table, and she shared with me that she was, annoyed. It was sort of like it lived in this vague, fed up, just this sort of low level humming type annoyance at her boss. As we started coaching and as she was able to see much clearer what was actually happening and how he was kind of treating her and why she felt so uncomfortable and belittled, quite frankly, at work, her voice started to lower and her body language changed and she sat up straighter and she looked fierce. And I was like, what's going on for you right now? What are you finding? What do you feel in your body? What has changed? And she's like, I'm angry. And she said that to me with such conviction and such direction to her anger that I was like, yes. And she also was a little bit scared of herself. And I was like, don't be scared. This is good. This is productive anger. It means you're going to do something about it. It means that you're going to say something to your boss in a way that can actually be heard, right? So without the coaching, who knows? I don't know what would happen, right? Most likely she would have been very passive aggressive and not said anything to him. Or if she did decide to say something to him, she would have done it in a way that would have been the bad kind of angry, the unproductive kind of angry, where you just get mad at somebody and they can't even hear you because they just see you as the loony bin, right? They're like, what's wrong with her? What's eating her? Why is she so mad? But in that moment, she tapped into her productive anger, that part of us that says, I've had enough. I'm frustrated. I'm going to do something about this. And by having enough, it's this idea as women that we've had enough. We're tired of being belittled. We're tired of being diminished. We're tired of being overlooked. We're tired of having to prove our value and constantly have to protect our space. And then there's the other side, which is that we're tired of leadership. Another conversation inside of the leadership table, and these are more easier for me to access because these are one-on-one conversations, but I'll give you some examples in executive ahead of time where a woman said to me, I'm done. I'm done with this. I've met the leadership team. They're all assholes. I want nothing to do with them. I don't want to be on the leadership team at this company. This is ridiculous. It's horrible. I want nothing to do with this leadership team. Right? I'm quitting. I'm out of here. All of those things. And when she shared that with me, she was in the unproductive, angry state, right? Which is let it out, be done, all of those great things. But the way that she was speaking, it was incredibly unproductive, right? She was blaming, she was pointing fingers, she was being extremist, sort of saying, this is the way it is. And I don't even want to be in leadership. This is just the way it is, right? And when we hear something horrible that happens on the news under completely distressing and horrific leadership that we experience in the United States, we feel like the system is broken, and the system absolutely is broken. It absolutely is. And we feel so disempowered against the system. What can I do about that except for protect myself? And so what I offered to her was, how can we actually channel this anger into something that is truly productive? how can we start to shift this so that you too can also make that change? And the first thing that I want you to do, if you're listening to this and you feel frustrated and you feel like throwing your hands up and you feel like quitting your organization and you feel like walking away and just being like, I'm out of here. The first thing I want you to know is fine, like leave. I want you to quit. I don't want you to put up with toxic behavior at all. So don't think that I'm saying like suck it up. I absolutely am not. Don't put up with this crappy behavior around you. But unless you can shift it into productive anger, you're just going to quit and run into another problem. So we have to kind of look at the root of what it is that's really happening to you and give you outlets for this frustration and ways to work within that frustration so that you feel empowered to make a change. So the first thing is always about distance, okay? So getting yourself some time and space, because when you are in the amygdala hijack, as they call it in emotional intelligence, when that part of your brain is literally hijacked, you can't react in a productive way. You're reacting emotionally. You're reacting in a very strong, forceful way, which in a lot of instances, like if you have to pick up a car off of a child or a dog, is great, right? Channel that energy, pick up the car. But a lot of times we're not fighting for our life. That is a life-threatening situation. And that's why we have this part of our brain that just kicks into that high gear and gives us that kind of intense power to be able to lift up an entire vehicle. But in most of our cases, we are not in that situation. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to give yourself space. A woman inside of executive ahead of time. And by the way, these are tough subjects, right? And not everybody is going to bring up on our weekly coaching call an executive ahead of time in a group setting about their anger and how pissed off they are. But that's why I give, even in executive ahead of time, I'm doing now these small group career strategy sessions where you get a very teeny tiny group of people. So we had a group of 3 women last week in executive ahead of time. This is available to you when you join this program. So I highly encourage you to join it and we can start really getting to the root of all the things that are happening for you. But a woman was sharing with us her experience of being gaslit by her boss because she spoke up, right? She was the whistleblower essentially for her boss and said something about his leadership. And then she got put on a performance improvement plan. Listen to this. She spoke up about her boss and got put on a performance improvement plan. If that doesn't piss you off, then you're living under a rock, right? That is happening all the frickin' time. And so what she did, which was so brilliant, is she immediately went on medical leave. And she did all this on her own. This wasn't part of the coaching session. She gave herself space, though. And when she came to the coaching session, she was so grounded and rooted in that productive anger, right? She was ready to do something about it. And she was like fierce, right? When a woman is fierce, like there is no stopping her. And that's the kind of badass that I want you to be, right? But in order to get there, she had to give herself space. So the best thing she did is go on medical leave because it wasn't a matter of life and death. She didn't need to solve this situation in that 30 seconds. So she gave herself the space to then figure out what she was going to do next. So that's the first piece in overcoming and turning these angry moments in our frustration into productive anger is to really be able to look at the situation for what it is. And the only way we can do that is with space. The other thing I want to impart you with today is that we're not trying. So this podcast is Women Changing Leadership, but we're not actually trying to change the entire system. I want us to. I want things to change, but I also understand that in order to make that change, we have to make simple, small shifts with ourselves. We actually cannot fight the entire system at once. And so when you're just using your anger to be mad at the entire system and to say leadership is the problem and I don't even want to be a part of this corrupt society, you're losing sight of the places that you can, in fact, make a change. You are ignorant to the places that you can make that difference. And so I want to remind you that we're not actually trying to change the system. Right? Yes, we want more women in leadership so that we can make those changes. But do you know the best way that we can make that change is to get you promoted? Right? Like I have had people tell me that they're hesitant to even join executive ahead of time because they're like, well, what can I do? Right? I don't even know if I want a promotion. I can't, the leadership table isn't even interesting to me. Because it's just a bunch of dudes. Like, I don't want to be a part of that, right? Even if they're nice dudes, I don't want to be a part of that. It's not enjoyable to me. This isn't what I want to go into work and do every single day. And I have to remind you that your getting promoted is part of that change. The best way that you can get more women in leadership is to get yourself in leadership. You are a woman and get yourself in leadership and start lifting other women up to the top. But we have to get your next promotion underway. So we're going to do it in a way that maybe it involves leaving your organization, going out and finding an organization that doesn't have a toxic culture. Maybe it happens a little bit at your organization, but then once you get so far, you still leave because you realize at the boardroom level, you're not interested in being a part of that particular organization. Fine. But it still involves you getting promoted because you can be that minor change that actually shifts the course of leadership. I mean, who am I, right? I am a person working out of my home office in Berkeley, California. But I am shifting leadership. How am I shifting leadership? One single corporate badass promotion at a time. And I am, in fact, changing the leadership table. The ripple effect is huge to the work that I'm doing. A lot of activists will also refer to themselves as accidental activists, right? There were women who just wanted to go to school and ride the bus to school, to be allowed to ride the bus to school, that didn't want to get beat up on the way, right? And then they became a role model for an entire generation of other Black women. They just wanted to go to school. But what did they do? They committed to them going to school. And for many of you, you just want to have a voice. You just want to be included. You just want to have your work matter. You just want to be paid fairly. So remember that that is a form of activism. And that is a form of productive anger that is actually doing something about what is happening in your world today. So if you're listening to this episode and you feel frustrated and you feel stuck and you feel like the world is changing around you, I want to remind you that your promotion matters. You getting promoted matters. You staying in leadership matters. Whatever that means. Like I said, I don't care. It doesn't matter if you do it at your company. It doesn't matter if you do it with your asshole boss. It doesn't matter if you even become an entrepreneur and you just change into a different level of leadership, right? I don't care what it looks like. But you being your highest self, you being your corporate badass self, you showing up every single day in your own integrity, and then also being willing to walk away when things are not working for you, to be willing to take that step back. That is how we turn our anger into productive action. That is how we're truly going to change the leadership table. That is my mission. That is my angry rant for today. And I hope that you're able to listen to this and pull some golden nugget of wisdom so that you can take whatever it is that you're feeling, sadness, grief, anger, frustration, joy, like feeling happy about what you're able to accomplish, and turn that into something that really, really matters. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye.